Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of SporticoLive. I guess we're going to have an NBA edition this time, smack dab in the middle of the NBA Finals. 2-1 Phoenix Suns. Sorry, Peter. We'll that's not over yet. I know, just 2-1. Just stating the facts. We have Peter Feigin, the president of the Milwaukee Bucks, Jason Rowley, president and CEO of the Western Conference champion Phoenix Suns. Gentlemen, thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
In a former life, Peter, I think you know this, in a former life, I don't know how many decades ago, but I covered the NBA. It wasn't quite the tape delay era, but I grew up under David Stern. And David had this, as you both know, this grand vision for a global entertainment property. So just quickly, let's get a 30,000-foot view from both of you. Where is the business of basketball in terms of fulfilling David's vision?
I'll give it to Jason's. Going to have a tough night tonight, with a loss. So I'm gonna let him start, and I'll follow.
Trash talk at the start. I love it.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. The competition, right? Look, I think here's the thing to look at. The game tonight will be seen in 200 countries across the world, viewed by over 1 billion people. We're seeing the development of basketball and the NBA's footprint expanding in Africa and China, India, across the world. You look at the number of players in our league that are international players, and there's simply no doubt. And then from a business standpoint, you start looking at the brands that have partnered with our teams and our league, and there's simply no question that the NBA basketball as a product has a significant and growing global reach. There's no question about it, and it transcends the local, it transcends the national, and it's something that we all are very much beneficiaries of. But it's been a terrific league to watch. I've been for 15 years, and just to see that growth over that period of time has been just nothing short of astounding.
Yeah, and I just
Peter, you have one of those international players in Giannis. I mean, you see firsthand that's just a small piece of the pie, but your take on sort of where the NBA is.
Yeah, I think it's our growth. When Jason and I and the rest of the presidents kind of sit and talk about where the opportunity is, it's in global growth. So it's in our marketing rights on a global, it's in our execution, it's with global partnerships in a big way to generate revenue. It's in international games. And as he mentioned, 200 countries and billions of eyeballs. And that only helps us position everything from our patch partnerships to our academies around the world. So it's really the platform, that David set decades ago, and Adam has really just kind of put the accelerant on, specifically with the players. And we've got the Giannis effect. So, we have more fans in Europe and Asia in the city, for the city of Milwaukee than you can ever imagine. And that just gives you a taste of kind of the power of what the NBA media power has become.
What have the last couple of weeks been like since you advanced to the championship? It's such a compressed time. Do you get a chance to enjoy it, or are you so focused on the tasks at hand that maybe when you're over you'll look back?
No, I think this is literally like drinking from a fire hose. Like, you think you're prepared, and I don't know if Jason feels the same way, but this is all of our teams together. We just sat here and said, oh my goodness, this is the moment in time. You're one of the two last of the 30 teams. There are so many opportunities. How do we leverage this in every way, whether it's internal, external? It's a commercial for our city. It's an expansion of our brand. It's the building of our pipeline, for ticket holders, for sponsors, for everything. So there are not enough hours in the day. So you're kind of on fumes, but it's adrenaline you can't even imagine, because the NBA Finals is a world event.
That's absolutely right. You can do everything you can to be prepared for it, but at the end of the day, until it hits, you know what your schedule is going to be. You know what the opportunities are going to be. It's just an amazing thing to be in the middle of. And you look at for us, when usually, to be really candid, over the last 10 years or so, we'd be looking at how are we going to program our draft party and stuff like that. Whole different world here, right? And a good problems to have, certainly.
Take me through, both of you guys. How do you capitalize? Peter, you just mentioned a number of metrics. How do you capitalize? And give me some data to show me how are we, I assume it's going to be a hockey stick. People are interested. It's all good.
Yeah, so think of simple supply and demand for the finals. We get into a place where you're really doing, 5 to 8 times your revenue, on a given day, in ticket revenue, which is a phenomenal feat as you go through the 4 rounds of the NBA. Think of our buildings. Phoenix has just gone through a renovation, a $250 million renovation. We have a new building. Like, how do you monetize every square foot? And for us, the outside as well, in a very big way. Your retail is literally on a daily basis continues to multiply. And then for us on the ground, like, what this does is just literally pokes the interest of the world in such a great way. So every prospective client we've ever talked to for sponsorships, and then some new ones who are actually who are pushing towards us versus us pulling them, are coming. So it's kind of one of these incredible invisible hands that allows you to build your business instantaneously in a big way. And for us, this is what the magic of the NBA is. A small market can really gravitate to big market numbers.
Right. Yeah, and particularly coming out of COVID, we all had to suffer. We didn't start having fans in our building until mid-February, and we were actually one of the earlier teams to start having fans back. But you look at the metrics of what you're generating from a revenue standpoint, your ticket sales during the playoff run here. And it's multiples of what it was during the regular season. And what we've been able to do is not just leverage that for this season, but obviously there's such demand to try and get into the building for these games that it's like, hey, you know what, if you want to get tickets to the finals, you want to get tickets to the Western Conference Finals, you got to sign up for a membership to get your early access. And that's been a very, very effective tactic for us, just in terms of broad numbers. Our FSE numbers are up about 85% over last year. Our new sales are up almost 300%.
I think you're number one, Jason. You're number one in the NBA for new seasons.
Yeah, it's been an astounding run, and it does show the pent-up demand here in this market. It'll be interesting to see what it looks like next year, if there's any kind of a hangover, if you will. I can anticipate maybe that having a bit. But the bottom line is, you're gonna go up the ladder here. It's just, are you at the top of it, the middle, or the bottom, and you're taking advantage of the opportunity? And I'm extremely proud of our staff, which have really stepped up here.
Yeah, both of you, talk to me about your buildings. Peter, you mentioned it. You have a fairly new building. Jason, you had the renovation. I love that you have sort of the common area, like a big bar that has a view of the floor. How are buildings changing? What are the fans telling you? Is it premium? Is it sight lines? What matters, and how do you squeeze the nickels out of it?
So it kind of was an ebb and flow. Before COVID, the whole push was to, just as you said, create these gathering areas, common areas, get rid of walls, open things up, create a lot of spaces for people to spend time together and really, really socialize. And then all of a sudden, COVID hits, and there was a bit of time where people thought, and we were going through our remodel at the time, like, wait a minute, are all these gathering spots now going to be places where people don't want to go? That was a short-lived concern, because if you come to the building and see the games, all those spaces are highly activated, extremely popular, and situations where people are coming to the games much, much earlier than they would have before to be able to come into the building and enjoy it.
Yeah, and I would just say there are no more cookie cutter buildings. Like, if you go through Phoenix, you go through Fiserv Forum, you're going to see kind of big social, flexible areas that we can pivot, and we don't have to wait 30 years to a renovation to figure out kind of like what the trends are, and what things like grab and go, and what things like, kind of open air bars are like. And we're an open concourse arena, so it's ease of use in a very big way. So for us, and again, we've both had the advantage and incredibly out of COVID, how do we leverage technology? How do we leverage what we know? So for us, we've gone completely cashless. Like, our transaction numbers have gone up. Ease of use, customer centric, kind of ebbs and flows have really, probably gotten us 5 years ahead of where we would have been by just kind of reacting to the pandemic in a big way. And I think, some things aren't going to change. Like, this will be, it's, the cleanliness, safety, and security will continue to be at like a very high level going forward. And it's great. Listen, I also think there's like this incredible momentum that people are out of the pandemic and dying to socialize and dying to get out and dying. So like for us to have this moment and this platform is even multiplied higher because we're getting 30,000 people outside in the plaza, to watch road games.
What did you learn from the lockout? I'm assuming both franchises were in constant contact with their customers. You had to keep those touch points going. What did you learn? Did you collect some data? How do you utilize what you find out from your customers? Is that different from 1, 3, 5 years ago?
Well, I think number one is like the collaborative / collective of the NBA is such a strength. So like what Adam Silver did and what we've done as leaders of our individual teams and really come together, whether that was planning for the bubble and execution to launching like this season, it's all best practices. So like we laugh about beating each other on the court, but off the court, we are like glued to not wasting time, best practices, data among our teams and like-minded markets in a big way. So we learned a ton. I think, listen, at the end of this, it's all simple math. It comes down to the customer. So we learned very quickly, like our bread and butter is always going to be those season ticket holders and those long-term valued premium customers. How do we understand and cater to them and retain them in a big way? And I think the luck that we had of being part of the National Basketball Association is we knew business would be back. So we had to plan for retention and kind of take some hits, over a longer period of time.
Yeah.
Jason, what did you see?
One thing that was heartening to see was how many people stuck with you. It was going into it, you don't quite know how people are going to react coming out to it. And to Peter's point about how many people are just dying to come out and still be involved and still have a connection to the organization and still want to come out and do these exciting things. I think we were able to learn pretty quickly that if we could package things the right way, if we could continue communicating with the customers was something that we did consistently, and the thanks that we got from them for the feedback was just, it wasn't about when we were going to start up games again. It wasn't about what the prices were going to be. It was more about just communicating what was happening and really being transparent about that. And I think that's a good lesson for any issue going forward, whether it be if we end up in a lockout situation again or who knows. But just being as forthright and transparent with your fans as you can be. It was great to see how accepting they were.
Yeah, I don't think fans really understand sort of the collective business of the NBA. There's a unit at the league called TEAMBO, Team and Business Operations, where they try and assemble best practices and disseminate to teams. And y'all do work together. I remember not long ago, the NBA even thought about the teams getting together to order toilet paper for facilities to drive down unit cost. How have you guys worked together? I don't mean whether it's you specifically, but cross-team, cross-brand. How have NBA teams worked together to achieve best outcomes for everybody?
Yeah, TEAMBO is a great facilitator, but like anything else, the more organic it is, the better. And I think having TEAMBO in place creates the platform. But once you start developing the relationships across the different leadership, whether it be team presidents or chief revenue officers or leaders of HR, whatever it is, the league creates the platforms and the connection points. But once those relationships really start to get developed, it becomes very easy for people just to pick up the phone or shoot an email. And there's really an expectation, I think, at this point that if you do lob in a call to your counterpart at another team, that you're going to get a call back, and not just get a call back. You're going to get some answers to your questions and some help, rather than kind of being more protective and not being willing to share. And look, to the extent we talk about it, we're all global brands, and we're all to some degree fighting for deals with some of these larger brands that are out there, and there's certainly competition there. But I don't think that doesn't override the willingness of everybody to work together. At the end of the day, the better all the teams do financially, the better we all do. So I think there's a strong recognition of that.
Peter, give me an example of you picking up the phone, shooting off an email where somebody got back to you and helped you out.
Well, just think about what we've been through the last 4 years, like together on literally hundreds of millions of dollars of construction and renovation. So you pick up the phone and call Chris Russo's facilities group at the NBA and Aaron Schneider's, and instantaneously, there is not a question Jason couldn't get answered on best practices, on procurement, on construction, on sound equipment, to electrical outlets, to what we've done. And by the way, it's an open book because I'm not competing with him on like what his square foot return is in his arena. I want him not to waste his time.
Who hedged on the price of materials when they were going into either a renovation or construction? Did either of you hedge on materials, and who told you to do that?
Well, I think that could be a little more local when we're thinking about looking at lumber and saying, hey, we're about to build a hotel, we're about to do this. But I think, I think that becomes a little local. But, when we talk about trends, when we talk about F&B and we talk about what's going on, like in the world of technology, for Jason to have the knowledge that Brooklyn, Orlando, and Milwaukee has gone through in the last decade as they built and renovated their buildings, you can't put a value on it.
Right. That's right. Yeah, and that goes across other pieces of the business. I mean, look,
right.
Poor Levy or Airmark, they can't do a deal, and obviously they realize that I'm going to know what's in deals that other teams have done. It's just the way it is. So those things are helpful.
And Scott, I'd also say, think of our social justice, think of our NBA Foundation, think of that's all.
Well, Peter, when I think of social justice now, I think of immediately two teams: the Milwaukee Bucks and the Atlanta Dream. That's who comes to mind. Is that unique to Milwaukee because of ownership, or because of? I mean, it just happened to be in your backyard, George Floyd. But what happened with the Bucks? Would that play in Arizona, Jason?
Absolutely, and we have a bit of a history of that ourselves. A different topic, but I don't know if you guys remember, about almost 10 years ago now, there was a state legislation called SB 1070, which for all practical purposes was nothing more than a racial profiling legislation that allowed police officers and sheriffs and so forth to stop people just because they looked a certain way. We took a very strong and aggressive stance against that. That's when we introduced our Los Suns jerseys in support of the Hispanic community here, because that's frankly who that legislation was directly targeting. And I think you see that across the NBA, that we are a progressive league and a league that recognizes our position in the community, and that we have an obligation to do the right things as it relates to social justice. And those, at the time, 10 years ago, we had some season ticket holders that were vehemently opposed to the position we were taking, and our view was, we're going to do what we think is right, and if you're not comfortable with that, then perhaps this isn't a great relationship for you. So there are potential financial consequences to those things, but ultimately, I'm very proud of our league and our teams and our players, and we also have a WNBA team who have been very aggressive in the social justice space, and we couldn't be prouder of that record.
Are sponsors just as willing to accept players and being as vociferous in social justice issues, or do you have to sort of walk a tightrope between team, players, and sponsors?
I think you've got to be transparent and honest and know what your platform is and directionally where you're going to go. So there's no surprise for sponsors. If there are prospective sponsors or existing sponsors that don't agree, kind of directionally where we're going, probably not the right partners to go forward. So we kind of do that as our value proposition. Hey, we don't want to surprise you. Like, this is where we stand. This is our history. This is where we go forward. We found it as almost, much more of a positive. There have been more people that have gravitated towards us to kind of applaud directionally where we're going than people that have said, hey, this is polarizing. I do not want to be a part of this, social or political comment. So we found it as like an equity chip, and it's been incredible.
Peter, talk to me about your ownership group. Change from Herb Cole. I mean, Herb, the local owner, not always the most embraced in terms of spending a lot of money to win, but then you bring in Wes, Mark, and Jamie, private equity guys. Is there a different way of doing business for private equity owners?
Yeah, I think there's an expectation. So these guys invest in and own, together hundreds of companies. They're very involved. They certainly have key objectives and goals, whether they be financial, or to win a championship. So I think, simply put, at 30,000 feet, Mark, Wes, and Jamie said that we're going to be the gold standard of a growth business, and what that means organizationally and process-wise and kind of vision. And we're going to win a championship on the court as part of that. And if those are your two overarching goals, how do you kind of hire managers to kind of plot that out and execute and constantly measure? So, I think, probably
that sounded a little strained, by the way. The constantly sounded a little strained.
Well,
like your phone rings 4 times a week.
The best is, like, these guys, like, this is one of these investments that's a passion for them. So they are ultimately engaged. I guarantee you, I communicate more with these guys than some of their more valued companies, their CEOs, because this is their passion, and they're able to mix kind of their business and their passion, and their families are involved, and this is on a global platform, and this is so exciting. So just think, for Jason, I mean, I have, like, a board of directors that are, titans of the world, and that are kind of incredible, like what their insight and their depths are. But yeah, they're challenging. Make no, bones about it. Like, their expectations are, like, to win at every level.
Well, so let me ask you this, because when I think of private equity, I think of driving down costs. But I'm guessing now in this business, one, they want to drive down costs. But 2, they want also to see that increase in revenue. It's not one or the other. It's achieve both. How difficult is that?
It's extremely difficult when we know that our expense side is, player compensation, and kind of where that goes, and where you are as a market team, a small market, a large market, which really affects your revenue side. But, I think, the biggest learning curve for ownership is to understand, like, what the investment has to be. How do we balance that? We try desperately to figure out kind of where the inflection point is to going over the luxury tax to under in a long-term plan. And we're in kind of rarefied space. I mean, we renewed Giannis for 5 years. We've got a core of Drew, and we've got a core of Chris Middleton. We know kind of directionally, on an expense side, that we're going to be a championship caliber team, and that's what we're spending to be. And then we've got to balance that with, like, kind of like very aggressive growth metrics of how do we compound, double-digit growth year after year in a small market.
I'm going to get back to you on that compounding growth. But Jason, you were nodding your head. Robert Sarver tells you what? Do what? This is what I require out of you, Jason.
He has a high, like every owner, high level of expectations. Been successful in his other businesses. I think I always kind of chuckle when people talk about meddling owners and owners shouldn't be involved. At the end of the day, I think if any of us invested anywhere from $500 million to $1 billion in a business, you probably want to have some involvement and actually have some impact and oversight. So at the end of the day, he's very clear about the expectations. We need to generate revenue. We need to keep our expenses low. We need to have a strong commitment in the community, and we basically need to put on a winning product on the court. It's a relatively simple recipe at that 30,000 feet. When you get to the execution of it, obviously there's a lot more detail involved. But the bottom line is we are always looking to be as innovative and pushing the envelope as much as we can to kind of try and run those dollars out as high as we can. And that takes constant focus. It takes investment, and not just the basketball side. It takes investment in analytics, your business modeling, what you're investing in terms of your sales staff. All those things matter and have a big impact. And then obviously, again, it gets to the point where when you are in a position of being a championship caliber team, now it's a different set of problems, good problems, but a different set of problems than when you're winning 20 games, right? So you got to learn how to focus on the things that you can really change and press and adapt and increase right now. And that's really what we're focused on.
So coming out for both of you guys, I mean, obviously this is a great platform. If you're going to drive Kager here, where are the opportunities to get that double-digit growth rate?
Well, for us, so we obviously run an arena and an events business. We run a real estate business. We certainly run a brand business. I think what's done incredibly well, much like arenas are no longer standalone arenas, and they are part of much bigger ecosystems for us. It's how do you leverage our brands? Whether that's incubators, in a private equity model, like locally for businesses, whether that's outsourcing some of our services. By default, we happen to be like the largest security and housekeeping force, in the state of Wisconsin. How might we outsource, as an example, how might we outsource? Over COVID, we created a ghost kitchen called the Cream City Cluckery, which happened to do, a couple $1,000 a night and pick up chicken fingers orders, and like we're expanding them to figure out. I mean, the fun thing about private equity and investors and innovators as kind of your leaders and your owners is like, God, if you can rationalize a return and you've got an opportunity to do it, it goes way beyond. And from Wes Eden's ears, like, hey, mouth to my ears, like, Peter, you are not going to grow from selling hot dogs and selling tickets. Like, you better kind of figure out like how this is going to grow.
Yeah, they're not mom and pop organizations anymore. These are platform companies.
They are.
Yeah.
And one of the big opportunities for us, and a lot of teams across different markets, I'm not sure what it is in Wisconsin right now, but sports betting is obviously going to be a huge catalyst. Here in Arizona, there was just a passage of sports betting legislation that is pretty unique in the country, in that the holders of the license are actually the teams themselves. And so, because we own the Suns and because we own the Mercury, we actually are going to be the holder of 2 licenses, one deal with FanDuel, another deal with Valley Sports, to operate both retail and mobile sports betting books here in the state of Arizona. So that's a tremendous growth opportunity for us.
What are Jason, I'm curious, because everybody's been talking about sports betting, obviously. What do the projections say?
Well, if we're even close, this is anywhere from $150 to $200 million a deal over the life of it. So some pretty significant dollars. And for the Mercury, the single largest standalone team deal in women's sports history, about $60 million, because of the tie-in to sports betting.
Right. So you mentioned earlier, I think somebody said $500 million. If you spend $500 million on the team, I mean, that's really low these days. If you look at the valuations, I mean, we put out valuations. Jason, you recently had Dial come in as private equity capital into some LPs wanted to get out. I don't think Robert sold any of his stake in the team. But what's been the change in ownership, in the availability of capital, in the requirements of capital, because of the mushrooming valuations of these teams?
We haven't had a whole lot of adjustment in our ownership group. This Dial did come in and bought a small piece, and I know they're looking at some other teams as well. And it is a nice way for minority owners to get the ability to have a little bit of liquidity to have that program in place. But for us, it's been relatively stable. Robert has been the managing partner since his group bought the team back in 2004. We've had a couple of people come in and out over time, but nothing significant. And from a management and direction standpoint, he's really the person who continues to hold the reins here.
Have you laughed, all of you? Every time somebody buys a team and it's usually a record price, everybody says that's an insane amount of money to pay.
Yeah, I mean, I always think of our guys bought our team about $550 million, and 2 weeks later,
more than, you're right, Peter, more than Steve Ballmer's $2 billion purchase. People looked at Wes, Mark, and Jamie and said the 550s nuts.
Are you crazy? Are you
crazy
in Milwaukee, Wisconsin? You're going to buy a team that doesn't have an arena? And like, literally, I mean, that summarizes team valuations for me all the time. I love when people want to sit down and talk about what their model is for team valuations, because I sit there and go, here's the Milwaukee purchase. 14 days later, here's the Clippers purchase.
Well, you know what we do at Sportico, credit to Kurt Bodenhausen and Peter Schwartz, we value teams and their related businesses as one entity, because we don't see how you can possibly leave out your real estate venture or anything else, your accelerator. If one's going to go, you probably sell them all. Is that how you view sort of the holistic team these days?
I think so, because it's all around the mothership, right? You are leveraging this incredible global brand to build the other businesses. So that makes great. It's all connective tissue.
Right. All right. We'll get out with this, guys. You've given us a half an hour. Appreciate it. Actually, Jason, one for you. Chris Paul. He's the president of the Players Association, not only just a player. Curious as to your take on athletes these days like Chris, who are getting more involved in business more than ever before, using the brains, not just the brawn.
It is absolutely beautiful to see. The more players view themselves as partners, because they are partners with the owners of the teams, and the more that they focus on the business aspects of what it takes to run a professional sports team or a professional sports league, the better it is for everybody. So I think it's terrific to have minds like Chris and James Jones as well as our general manager,
Yep.
also as a member.
He was a former union official as well.
That's correct. So having those individuals who are associated with the team is also very valuable for us, because they can help provide both perspectives. And so I think it's great to see the players really, certainly not taking off their player hat, but definitely focusing on the business of the NBA as a business, no doubt about it.
All right, we'll get you both out on this, because we're talking about all these great mushrooming valuations, but how much they paid. Jason, Peter, if your teams won the title, so if Jason, you get 2 more wins, Peter, you get 3, but you lose money, is that a successful season for your owner?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so the one time, would that be true of a second ring, or is it really just that first one?
I think it's any ring.
I was talking maybe we won 15 in a row, then maybe it's a different deal.
Yeah. I'll ask Jerry Reinsdorf from back, what he remembers back in the Bulls. By number 6, he wanted profit and ring. All right, well, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time. We do appreciate it. To get a glimpse of sort of where the NBA is now and where it's headed from, the guys running the teams at the top right now, that's really good for our audience. So thank you very much. We do appreciate it.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, and by the way, Sportico, big day. No, we're not winning any NBA titles at Sportico, but we did launch our paywall today. So we do hope that all franchises and everybody watching signs up. Go to Sportico.com, hit that subscribe button. We'd love to have you as part of our community.